one of the vegetables that you can get fresh in the late fall and then during the winter and even into the spring during the cool season is cabbage. And it's a great vegetable. It's extremely nutritious, but a lot of people don't like it cooked. Coleslaw is the common way in the U.S. for it, and it's not that nutritious in most of the coleslaw recipes because it's got so much fat added to it. So today we're going to make something similar to a cabbage roll, and this is simply a shredded cabbage casserole. It has a lot of the same flavors as a cabbage roll. So we've got some ground beef, and I've got medium onion that's been chopped up, and we're going to add that to our dish here, and we're just going to let those brown up together and get rid of all the pinkness. Now, if you have a little bit of pink left on this, it's not going to be the end of the world because it is going in the oven for about 45 minutes. But what we want to do is render any fat that might be in here. So I've started with a fairly lean ground beef. In fact, it is, I think, of 93% lean ground beef as opposed to an 80% lean. So there's not going to be as much fat, but you could start with whichever one that was on sale at the market, because this is one of those dishes where you have the opportunity to drain the fat away and make sure that by the time it gets to the plate, it's pretty much the same fat content either way you go. I also want to add to this a clove of garlic that's been minced up fairly well. And because we have the meat in here and the onion, which are going to put out a lot of juice, we can go ahead and add the garlic fairly early on so we get more of that flavor developing through the recipe and through the dish as it begins to cook. If you're doing something where it's just going to be the garlic by itself, then you don't want to cook it very long because it browns so easily. But because we've got those other liquids here, it's not going to have the opportunity to get to the point where it's browned and then quickly to burnt. Now, I've gone ahead and shredded the cabbage ahead of time. Now, as we look at ways to save money at home, couple of things we've done here today can help you save money. One is with the garlic. I went ahead and minced the garlic myself, bought a whole bulb of garlic and broke out a clove and did the peeling and the mincing. And that saves you some funds, and it stores for a long time that way too. The other thing that you can do is buy a full head of cabbage. Look for one that's shiny, that's heavy for its size, that's fairly round. If it's oblong, that means there's been some not so good growing conditions and that kind of thing. And tight, which is going to give it some of its heft as well. We're going to need 4 cups of shredded cabbage, which in a normal head runs around 8 cups when you shred it, so half a head of cabbage here. Simply cut it in half, take the core out, and shred it from there. You can do it very, very simply with a big knife. There are some specialty equipment, things that you may have around in your house, like a food processor, that may enable you to do it a little bit quicker, but it's a whole lot less expensive to go that way than to go in and buy pre-shredded cabbage, or if you're looking at lettuce and salads, pre-shredded, that kind of thing too. If you're actually getting it out of your garden, of course, then this is the only way you can do it. I'm going to wait for this to go ahead and get browned, and then we'll move on from there. All right. I've got 2 cups of tomato sauce that I'm going to add. Now, if you're worried about the sodium content in your diet, then look for some that has no sodium added to it. If you're using commercially prepared tomato sauce, the cans are not quite 2 cups. You can add a little bit of water to it to kind of stretch it out there, or you can just not worry about it. This is a casserole, and we're going to get a lot of liquid that's going to cook out of our cabbage as it goes. So that's one of the things that we're going to go with here. Now, the next things we're going to add to this are let me see, a half a teaspoon of salt. Now, if you're using the kind that already has salt in it, then I would probably leave that out, and then you could add it later on if you decided it needed it. And here's where we get some of those really interesting flavors. I've got 1/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of cloves, and oh, this smells so good. I love the smell of both of those, and to have them in something that's not sweet is always a treat. I'm also going to add 1/2 teaspoon of dried basil and 1/2 teaspoon of dried thyme leaves and stir those in. I'm going to turn this down, and we want this to simmer for about 10 minutes before we go on with the next step. And that just lets the flavors blend together a little bit more. Also evaporates some of this liquid that we've got here, gets everything more concentrated, because as I said, as cabbage cooks, it gets a lot of liquid is going to start coming out of that. Now, you didn't see me drain the meat before I started adding these other ingredients, and if your meat did need to be drained, you should go ahead and do that before you add the tomato sauce and the herbs and the spices. After 10 minutes, we're ready to go on with the next step. We've got our cabbage shredded, and we're going to put 2 cups of our cabbage in the bottom of the casserole. Now, this is a 2-quart casserole. Shape really doesn't matter. It's the size that we're interested in. And it's going to be really full because the cabbage is still full size. It hasn't shrunk down with the heat yet. So we put a layer of cabbage. We've treated our pan with a nonstick spray. And then we're going to add half of our meat mixture over the top of it. Just spread it over, and then we'll repeat the layers. And this is going to go in a preheated 350-degree oven for about 45 minutes. And make sure that you put a lid on it because we want to keep that moisture around it to help cook the cabbage leaves. And if you don't get it divided perfectly in half at this stage, it really doesn't matter because it's all going to get in the pan eventually anyway. And it doesn't have to be a real fine shred. Just get that last little bit of sauce over the top of it. It's sort of like layering a lasagna kind of thing here, except it's easier because we only have the 2 layers. Now, I've treated the casserole itself. Make sure you also treat the lid with a nonstick spray because this is going to bubble up a bit, and I think some of the worst methods that I've had to deal with as far as burned on things after they come out of the oven have been on casserole lids. So I'm giving you fair warning to treat that as well as the rest of it. Put the lid on that, again, into the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes, and you end up with something that looks like this. And there's going to be some juice on the bottom, and you want to make sure that you get that juice on your plate as well and have some crusty bread to absorb that because that's part of the best part of it. And this is one of those recipes that probably tastes even better on day 2 than it did on day 1. This is ground beef and cabbage casserole for Oklahoma Gardening. This is Barbara Brown.